Hey everybody, 8-Bit Josh here, and welcome back to another Planet Coaster Console Edition tutorial video. And in this episode, we're going to be talking all about terrain and realistic rock placement, as well as path tunnels through terrain and the different collision settings that are available. So we are here in our tutorial park, and let's get started. One of the issues I've heard is people having trouble making paths through terrain. Now, unfortunately, it's not something that I've really experienced myself, so I don't know how much help I'm going to be here, but I'm going to do my best. So I have a little elevated terrain here that I made, and we're just going to make a path right off of our main pathway area here. And we're going to go, and as you can see, the game doesn't like it. Terrain too uneven for placement. So we're gonna go back a couple, and then we're gonna go over here to our path setting, and we're gonna go to tunneling. This is actually an elevated path now, so if we place it, you can see it kind of cuts out the terrain underneath, and then as we place it, you just kind of keep on going. I've heard that the issues people have had with this is with the camera, and I honestly haven't really experienced that. Like, that worked out pretty well for me. But if you're struggling with the camera, I would suggest maybe either keeping the camera low, like the way I just did it, or zoom out a lot. So this way the camera doesn't really try to compete with the terrain and the tunnel, and then you can kind of just see, you can see the outline of the path there, and this way you can kind of get a good idea about where it's going to come out. Now when it comes to rocks, it's pretty easy to just kind of take a couple rocks, you place them around, maybe give it like a little bit of a rotate, and you're like, okay, that looks all right, but you can still kind of tell it's like the same rock, kind of just placed over and over again. But there are a few tricks you can do to kind of create a little bit more of a realistic rock placement. So say we'll take this rock here. Now if you look at it, if we move the cursor around, the rock kind of wants to like stick to the other rock, and it kind of adjusts it a little bit. One thing I like to do is actually go down here to the settings and do stick to surface off and align to surface off. And what this does is you can actually just sort of move the rock, or really honestly this works with any piece of scenery, and you can kind of just move it through there, maybe rotate it just a little bit like there, and you can almost create like just different little rock formations. Maybe you want to raise it up a little bit. And then you can get like these, it looks like one single rock, but it's actually the same rock, just placed 3 different times, but you kind of have it kind of clipping through itself, and you can create these other just different little rock shapes. The other thing that I like to do is take different types of rocks and mix them together, because that's a little bit more realistic. In real life, you'll see different rocks sort of mixed together. It's not just like one type. So maybe take one of these, place it around there. You might do something like this, rotate that there, and just get like a little bit of like a variation here. And then you might be left with something kind of like that. Obviously, I just threw this together, so you might want to take some more time with it. But then you could take something like these like bush pieces, maybe sink that down a little bit, or rotate, kind of growing up around your rocks like that. Maybe you'll take a tree. We can do like a little beech tree here. Another trick I like to do involves terrain painting, is actually blending the different terrain types to kind of get a more realistic look to your terrain. So it might be easy, like say you go over here, you have the intensity like all the way up, you select like the rock terrain, and then you just kind of paint around it, and then you get these like the game does a little bit of like blending between the different terrain types there. But what I actually like to do is I like to adjust the intensity So you can see here I have the intensity around 29% and the size at 6 meters. And then we'll kind of just like lightly paint around here like so. And then maybe take something like, you know, we could take the other rock terrain type and you just kind of blend them together like that. And then maybe let's throw in some leaves too. Why not? So we'll do like a little bit of leaves. Maybe we'll turn the intensity down even more. Quick way to do that, instead of, if you don't want to navigate on the menu here, just hold down square button and then use the left stick, either left or right or up and down. So I'm going to bring the intensity down there, and we're on the leaves, and we're just going to kind of paint some leaves around. Maybe the leaves will mostly be around underneath our tree here. And there's just a really simple, kind of more realistic rock placement. So doing those little things together can create some really cool results. But again, this is just a very simple, like, here's how you can do it. Try to make it as easy for you guys as possible. So now we're going to actually talk about the terrain tools a little bit. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory, but I am going to go over some stuff that I feel like might be the most confusing. I think all these different tools are pretty self-explanatory. You know, pull makes the terrain go up, push makes it go down, flatten the foundation. Well, it'll take whatever terrain you're at. When you click on it, it'll flatten the rest of the terrain to that point. Flatten to surface is pretty much the same as flatten to foundation, except for it does it at an angle. So for instance, you could do flatten to surface here, and you can see it flattens everything to that angle. And that has some, that can be actually pretty powerful if say you're doing like, you want to make some mountain ranges, you know, you can kind of raise it up like that. You can make it go down, and then you can kind of sculpt and do different things. Scenery lock, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, but just in case it might be confusing, basically this means if you're doing anything like doing the pull or push, this will either cover up your terrain or it will sculpt the terrain around your scenery. So I believe by default it's on. So if we try to pull the terrain around it, you can see it actually will sculpt around the plants we have there. In fact, it would actually create like a little cave. Scenery lock off is exactly the opposite. You can raise up the terrain and you can see it just goes right around it, doesn't even care. So I guess it depends on kind of what you're doing, whether or not you would want that on. Surface lock might be a little bit more confusing at first, because you look at it and you're like, all right, well, the cursor is still moving. I can't really tell what it's doing. And I believe surface lock is off by default. And basically what that means is we're pulling terrain up. You can see the cursor kind of goes around and will move to whatever surface it's on. If you do surface lock on, you actually won't see what it's doing until you until you hit the X button, basically. But it goes around, and then you can see, unlike before, it stays completely flat. The paint setting is what determines what kind of terrain type is going to be under your cursor whenever you're making any adjustments using the terrain tools. It's on auto paint by default, and just like it says in the tooltip, when you start raising it up, it takes into account the elevation. So it keeps it grass there, but as soon as it starts getting a little steeper, it actually will start painting like the rock terrain type around it. Use selected will use whatever you have in the painting options. So if we want to do this rock type, we have use selected, selected. And as we raise the terrain, you can see it's using that terrain type. Sampled takes what's ever under your cursor. So it doesn't matter what kind of terrain you have selected here. If you're over here on the grass, you can see it just keeps the grass. If we go over here, it actually paints over the that rock texture we used. However, we go back over here, click on the rock texture and come back over, then you can see it uses that. Same thing over here, it'll take that and it'll just use that rock texture everywhere. Next, we're going to cover collision settings, and you might not be aware that these exist because they're actually tucked away in the game settings. You're going to go to our options here, go down to settings, and we're going to go all the way over to the second to last tab. So we have these 4 settings here: disable scenery collision, coaster, ride, and terrain collision. And I'm going to go through each one to kind of show you what they do. They're probably self-explanatory, but I still think, you know, just being able to kind of see it in action can be helpful. So disable scenery collision. This basically allows you to place scenery through anything. By default, you know, if you want to place like a tree, the game won't let you place a tree through a ride. If you do disable scenery collision on, hit square to apply, select your tree again, and now you can just place it all throughout your ride. Now, you wouldn't really want to have trees going through a ride like that, but if you have a ride that you know, maybe you want some trees or rocks or maybe even a building placed a little bit closer because you know the ride wouldn't actually hit any of it while it's running, you know, you might want to have a tree a little bit closer. So you just use that to disable it, and then you can get your building pieces and scenery and whatnot just a little bit closer to your ride. So I'm gonna skip coaster collision and go to ride collision because this is basically the exact opposite of scenery collision, and this is, if it's on, allows you to place rides through existing scenery. So normally if we tried to place this and place the insanity ride right here, it would be red and it would tell us we couldn't do it. But now we can actually just place this through here if we wanted. Now again, you wouldn't actually put a ride through a building like this, but it just adds a little bit more flexibility. If you want to get your scenery and decorations just a little bit closer, you can do that. Disable terrain collision, just like the tooltip says, allows terrain to be manipulated through existing scenery or track. So if we go here, I have a little roller coaster placed. We go to our terrain menu, and we'll go to pull, and then you can see the terrain can be manipulated right through the roller coaster track. Now, obviously, that's not something that you would want to do, but it allows you to create a little bit more realistic. Say you want the roller coaster track to kind of really just hug the terrain. Maybe it's like you have a really hilly area, and then you could just do something like that where the track really just kind of hugs the terrain that's underneath. And then finally, disable coaster collision on. That basically just allows you to place roller coaster tracks through existing terrain or scenery. So here we have a roller coaster, we have a big hill right in front of it, and very simply, it just lets you build a coaster right on through the terrain. Now with the setting off, the game would bark at you and give you a big red track and let you know that there's intersecting terrain and that you can't place the track piece there. Now you could also get around this by going to the settings and doing auto tunnel on, and the game would create an auto tunnel there for you. But maybe you want your own custom tunnel, you want to actually sculpt out the terrain around it yourself. You know, that's definitely a way that you could accomplish that. So there you go, guys. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful. Just some basic rock placement, terrain tips for you. I do have some other tutorials planned, so if you aren't subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button and you click that notification button. That way you don't miss any videos when they go live. And as always, be sure to leave your comments, suggestions, and feedback down below. I am 8-Bit Josh, and thanks for watching. See ya.